This is the Needs Assessment Evaluation Process by Jason Clark for the Assessment of Learning course, led by Dr. Jonathan Lewis at the University of Phoenix. In this, we will actually be looking at the program description of the instructional coaching program for new coaches, also look at the problems that occurred in our needs assessment application, the purpose of this evaluation, what procedures did we use for collecting data, what procedures did we use for analyzing the data, and what were the results. The participants in the instructional coaching program of Oklahoma City Public Schools were classroom teachers with a minimum of 5 years teaching experience. They may have taught in elementary, middle school, or secondary classroom settings. Most of these participants have a master's degree. Most of these participants have no background or training in instructional coaching at the beginning of the program, but have been identified or were identified by their school leaders within their school as often mentoring new teachers or leading professional development. The timeline for the training program for new coaches is 1 school year. Instructional coaches, these new instructional coaches met twice a month. Each session lasted about 4.5 hours, and there were 12 sessions in all. Coupled with these were visitations bi-weekly by the professional development coordinator, who is their supervisor. And these visitations were to provide on-the-job mentoring, modeling, and supervision. Each of these visits lasted roughly 45 minutes. This needs assessment was created to identify any instructional gaps in the curriculum for the instructional coaching program, to ensure graduates of this program are capable of effectively being able to coach and learning strategies in our 4 primary areas: content planning, instruction, assessment, and classroom culture. It is also to identify any unseen biases or assumptions in the program. Out of the 25 new coaches hired at the beginning of the school year, roughly 45% showed deficiency in various areas of coaching. These coaches were given a content knowledge, pre, mid, and post assessment to measure their growth and understanding of what our coaching model is, how it is done, and ways to measure items in the classroom. This data showed significant gains each time. 90% of the class from the pre-test to the mid-test demonstrated mastery of the content presented as part of the training. This trend continued to the final summative assessment at the end of the course. However, school administrators and teachers at schools with an instructional coach were surveyed 3 times throughout the school year, and it is here that the results did not show the same promising results. Out of the 25 coaches at different schools, roughly 14 scored excellent or superior scores by teachers and administrators. Coaching evidence at those schools was substantial, with the majority of the teachers feeling confident in their coaches having utilized them to help maximize student achievement and engagement. 45% of the coaches, however, scored poorly. Teachers complained that these coaches seemed domineering, making unreasonable demands with unreasonable timelines, and did not seem to have a grasp on the current reality of the classroom. While coaching documentation shows these coaches initially had teachers come to them, it rapidly dropped off to almost nothing before the end of the quarter in each of these cases. Coaching cycles were left unfinished or showed unproductive with both teachers and students, with rare exceptions. The purpose of this evaluation was to determine how effective was the training provided to these coaches. Were teachers able to understand the coaching model, the teaching strategies and ways of measuring current reality versus changes happening throughout the teacher application of the process? Did coaches understand this in order to convey this to teachers? Another purpose of the biweekly visits of the coach supervisor, the professional development coordinator. These visits look at coaching documentation. They discuss the problem of practice in coaching and observe video or live coaching by that instructional coach. With this was to look at the perception of coaches in the district. And all of this together will help us identify changes that need to be made in the content and/or application of this program. So data will be collected throughout various times of the year and was collected. There was qualitative data that was collected at the end of every training session. 2 times a year, formative assessments were given. At the beginning of the year, the pre-test, like I mentioned, of the content and instructional coaching course was used to assess what tools the new coaches were coming in with prior to starting the program and where were the gaps that we could fill. That same assessment was given mid-year to measure those growth and gaps. And then there was a summative assessment that measured the end of year growth compared to the beginning of the year and the mid year, as well as to identify common learning gaps in the program that may need to be reemphasized or changed for the upcoming school year. Data was also collected 3 times a year from teachers, principals, and vice principals on their experience with their instructional coach through our planning, research, and evaluation department. These were surveys. Quantitative data was also collected from each coach regarding the number of instructional coaching cycles started, the number completed, as well as the number of professional developments offered by the coach and teacher application of the professional development opportunity. We also conducted one-on-one and focus groups, conversations and surveys, looking at one-on-one conversations with coaches, one-on-one conversations with teachers, administrators, as well as focus groups from all these groups on further feedback we might collect in identifying some of the gaps and some of the things that may need to be changed. The procedures we used, well, each type of data was looked at individually initially. We took each piece and we just looked at it by itself. Then the team noted trends in these individual data pieces and placed them together in an affinity chart of these common elements. So now we have an affinity chart and we're noticing here's some common elements that keep coming up in these various types of data. And then from there, we actually created a web organizer. And this web organizer noted connections between these or potential connections. With all of this together, we were able to identify trends and commonalities and then establish a plan for the changes that needed to be made. So the results of the data were as followed. Instructional coaches knew the content. They understood the content presented and showed more than adequate growth over the term of the training. However, there was a disconnect between the head knowledge of content and the application of their learning in 45% of them. Qualitative data from coaches on their training. The coaches said that the training was overwhelmingly positive. They were satisfied with it. They didn't have much that they would change about it. However, the coaches in their qualitative data said they were happy. The qualitative data from administrators and teachers about their coaches suggests that there seems to be a disconnect happening in the application of the coaching. They have the head knowledge, but the application seems to be coming behind. The decrease in the number of teachers seeking out coaching in 45% of our coaches coincides with the number of dissatisfied teachers and coaches. I'm going to say that again. The teachers seeking coaching decreased almost at the same level, to the same level, as those teachers who, in their surveys, suggested they were dissatisfied with their coach and coaching. When compared with which schools had issues with the coaches, we found that they matched. So we had the survey data of which schools seemed to be dissatisfied with the coaches. This actually matched with the lack of coaches performing coaching cycles. They're at the same schools. I guess that's what I'm saying. And so it does check out. They're not just dissatisfied, they're seeking to coach less and less. Another correlation we found is that these coaches' supervisors of the ones that were failing who visited were actually the same to professional development coordinator supervisors in all but one of these cases of the low performing coaches. We quickly recognized and realized the correlation between the supervisor and the coaches who were not doing well. We immediately compared the biweekly notes of the 5 supervisors on their biweekly visits to the coaches. The 2 PDC supervisors demonstrated serious gaps in their vision to their coaches. And when those visits did occur, data was not collected. There was no evidence of observing them. There was no evidence of observing them coach, whether in person or in video. It was also noted that during that time, little direction or help was given. So in the cases of these 2 supervisors, when the visits happened, they were not actually really coaching the coach. They were not actually collecting the data they needed. And it shows then a direct correlation of the coaches coaching the teachers. So in conclusion, what do we do? Well, we've decided that further training will be provided for the coaches not doing well. However, this training will be on the job training. They have the content knowledge, they're lacking in the application. They will be trained by some of the PDC supervisors who did well with other coaches, and they will be shadowed by the PDC supervisors who were lacking. These well-performing supervisors will mentor and shadow the other 2, providing peer review and coaching for the supervisors themselves. The low-performing supervisors will also receive further training on how to coach the coach and what things should occur during the visits. They'll be provided a checklist to ensure that this is actually applied, and then we'll have an additional review within 3 months of changes that are happening to see if further things need to come in place or were these steps adequate. Thank you.